Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Lifetime Legacy Lawyer podcast. I am Thomas Vick, joined by Seth Wilson. Seth, how's it going today?
Thomas, I'm doing wonderful. It's a beautiful fall day here in Indiana, and just that sunshine and vitamin D we were talking about a little bit beforehand was just a nice refreshment to the day to day kind of staring at the computer screen. So it's good to have that weather out there. How are you?
I'm good. Got to enjoy the fall weather while we've got it. My family went to an apple orchard this past weekend and enjoyed that. Got some apples made in apple pie, so I've been eating well this week. It's been a good week so far.
We like it. We like it. You can't beat apple pie in Indiana. That's some good stuff right there.
That's right.
Hey, so I got an email from you today, or here recently. I'm not exactly sure when I got it, but it was your monthly e-newsletter. And I know we talk pretty regularly here on the podcast about your normal kind of blog digest email. So I thought maybe it'd be good to explain the difference between those two and resources that are available from Vick Law.
Yeah, so each month there is an newsletter, and then every week on usually Friday mornings, sometimes it's Friday evenings, we've got a blog digest that goes out to our email list. And throughout the week, we provide blog posts, post them to the website, and then they're automatically sent out to individuals' email addresses at the end of the week. And then what you do with that is you click on the link, and then it'll take you to the website, to the blog post. One difference with the e-newsletter is that the article is already in the email itself. And it usually goes into pretty good depth in the email itself. So the e-newsletters are usually a little bit longer than the blog posts. But yeah, a couple different ways of getting information out there. And, this month's e-newsletter was a good topic. And I'm sure that you're going to be able to explain this one very, very well. It is what women need to know about estate planning. So I'll let you start us out with that topic.
Hey, appreciate that. No, nothing like putting me right on the spot there. Yeah, that is a kind of one of those scenarios you feel a little bit uncomfortable or out of your element, at least talking about what that perspective is. But from our observation and our practice, we obviously deal with lots of family dynamics, and that's really a big part of the analysis is making sure that we are looking at planning from multiple aspects and avenues. And so, as you kind of mentioned here, you want to make sure that each spouse is taken care of and protected. And your article, I think, had a really good observation that just statistically speaking, women will outlive men. And so a lot of times in that family relationship, the wife will outlive the husband, and there's a situation to plan for there. And I see that just, I've not done a statistical analysis of my client base necessarily, but a lot of times that is the case where the wife has outlived the husband based on that gender role. So good to have that discussion in. Appreciate that you had some in-depth here. So let's talk about a couple of the concepts here, but one of them is sort of the incapacity planning and how that works out. And we talk about this a lot on the podcast because of the importance of it, but really that power of attorney, both from the general financial side of things and the healthcare power of attorney as well. And then with the statistical analysis that we went through, knowing the likelihood of that's there, how do you have appropriate backups to, if you have an alternating spouse kind of plan set up?
Yeah, so a lot of times individuals will just name spouses as their powers of attorney, and but if that's as far as they go, I say we got to go a little bit further because there's going to be somebody that dies before you do in all likelihood, and you just don't know what's going to happen. Even if you have maybe one more person named, you don't know what will happen to that person. So I encourage people to name 2 or 3 people under the spouse to serve as power of attorney so that you've got some backup plans in place. Incapacity, we don't like to talk about it, but it happens pretty often, when people call us, it's pretty common for people to say, I've got husband in the hospital and they're going to release him to rehab, uh, but we don't have any legal documentation. And the unfortunate circumstance that I have to guide clients through is to tell a wife, you've got to go get guardianship over your husband. And that's just kind of an emotional turmoil situation where somebody that you have been taking care of for so long, maybe you've taken care of, you've been married for 40, 50 years, and now you have to go and ask a judge if you can continue to take care of them with proper legal authority. And that's a heart-wrenching conversation to have. And we've talked about it before, whereas a simple document that names the wife as the attorney in fact, and then names some backup folks to be attorneys and successor attorneys in fact, that would solve the problem. And so just the reality of incapacity is one thing that everybody should know, and women should know about estate planning. It does happen, and you want to be prepared for it when it does happen.
Yeah, it's a great point, because that when you get married, there's a lot of thought that, well, we're married, so we can act on each other's behalf, or we can make these decisions, or because we're the closest relative now, we have authority. And sometimes that works in the real world, and sometimes it doesn't. And as time has gotten progressively more complicated, and there's more policies and procedures with different entities like medical providers and banks, they're going to need to see that appropriate documentation before they're going to authorize you to act in any way. And we talk about kind of the red tape and maybe the levels of bureaucracy to get through on certain things. And that's truly the case, especially as you're dealing with a larger entity. So if you have a name brand, so to speak, or a nationwide bank, they're going to have more internal policies and procedures than maybe your local branch and bank might. And they knew you for 50 years. And so, hey, yeah, this couple went together. It's okay. We know who they are. And you're more of a number in the larger organization. So
Yeah.
really important to have that documentation in place.
Yeah, and echoing what you said there about sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't work, just by being the spouse of an individual. It tends to work out better for healthcare decisions, because Indiana has a statute that lays out who is priority. I don't have it quite memorized, but spouse is usually first, and then you've got adult kids, and then it kind of goes down the line. So that gets you to a point. If there's some kind of health event where you're in a hospital, you're able to make some decisions to that extent, but really financial decisions are very, very difficult, if not impossible, to accomplish without having a power of attorney or a guardianship in place. And so being prepared, like I said, for that moment is critical, and women and really everybody need to know about that. Yeah.
Yeah, one issue you address here is how that estate plan will intersect with tax planning when the first spouse passes. And this is one that's very unique because of how assets may be titled. And one spouse may have more assets in their individual name than the other, or vice versa. And so understanding that dynamic, especially as we've talked about in the past several episodes, of the change to the federal estate tax exemption rules. And when the spouse passes, and let's say the wife has outlived her husband by a number of years, there can be a very significant change, especially now, with what you do at that spouse's death, and making the appropriate elections for tax purposes, and preserving, if you can, that exemption amount of the predeceased spouse and those things. So very important that everyone knows that when a spouse or a loved one has passed away, you really need to take a look at what's there and make sure that the appropriate elections are made and or tax returns filed at that time, because of this change to the exemption amount that's coming up.
Right. And I guess it's particularly important for women because women live longer. So statistically speaking, husband dies first and then wife comes along, and if they have a taxable estate, then the surviving spouse is going to need to know, how do I plan for this? How can I lower my estate tax liability? And so we don't expect her to actually know the details of that, but at least know that it needs to be dealt with by a qualified estate planning attorney.
Yeah.
So yeah, certainly taxes need to be a consideration for women in their estate planning.
And you have a note here on blended families, and that's definitely an area that is ripe for both opportunity and potential conflict as you're talking about second marriage situations. Oftentimes, those blended family scenarios have two sets of kids involved and those types of things, and so there's a lot of analysis to help preserve the intent of the parties at that time, and what you're looking to do in that moment of time when things are there. How does the plan work together if it was sort of put together while you were together, or was it from a prior scenario? Just a whole host of challenges to address and make sure that the plans are in place.
Yeah, and planning for blended families can be quite difficult sometimes, depending on the dynamics that need to be considered. And I tell people the best way to plan for a blended family is to have a prenuptial agreement, but unfortunately that's not what the case is when they are coming into your door and coming into your office and they're already married and they don't have a prenuptial agreement. So you're kind of trying to figure out, well, what can I do? What kind of agreement might the married couple have to make sure that surviving spouse is taken care of, and also kids of a prior marriage are taken care of. And a lot of it has to do with what are the main assets. Do they have a house that was previously owned by somebody came into the marriage with, or did they buy the house jointly? So if they brought the house into the marriage, then maybe that spouse will direct that house to the kids, allow the surviving spouse to live in the home, and then maybe have a transfer on death deed or a trust that says everything to the kids after that. Or maybe it's retirement accounts. So maybe you want to say, yes, spouse can use what she needs for health, education, maintenance, and support from the retirement account, but you can't withdraw everything. There has to be some kind of restrictions on that so that the spouse can have what she needs, but also the secondary beneficiaries of maybe an IRA trust can be the decedent's kids. And so there may be some compromise that happens, and women need to be part of that discussion. Men need to be part of that discussion as they think about the future of their estate planning.
Yeah, and your article also mentions the elective share or the spousal inheritance statute and the right that each spouse has to their spouse's estate. And so you just need to be aware of and planning carefully around those topics to ensure that you're not subjecting your estate down the road to more challenge because we didn't anticipate this particular situation, or maybe we obviously didn't know how health conditions were going to be at the appropriate time. And so there may be a different need that wasn't anticipated as part of the original plan. And now we need, worked before, but now really we're going to have to take an elective share or something like that. And so just lots of things to think through, especially in that blended family scenario. And again, just a big challenge for everyone to think through, but especially if the woman is going to live longer than the man in that scenario, something that they will have to navigate and work through.
Something that I'll also throw out there is to make sure that the surviving spouse is covered. we've kind of talked about incapacity, but how can I protect, the surviving spouse, the wife, when the husband passes away? Do I have assets that are going to make it a smooth transition for the wife? So we're not going to have to go through a probate estate to make sure the wife has an interest. A will is important so that, it can direct everything to the spouse. A lot of times there becomes a split interest. I recently had this where marriage of decades long, but, the husband did not have a will, and therefore you've got a surviving spouse and then kids that have a shared interest. It's probably not what the husband wanted. So you got to think about that, and consider, it's fair to think about these things for planning for the surviving spouse, because the wife usually, or maybe not usually, but often has been out of the workforce for several years to take care of the kids. And so maybe her Social Security isn't as great. Maybe she doesn't have an IRA. Her economic situation may be quite different. And so there needs to be some specific thought and attention given to how can I make sure she's going to be okay if I pass away.
Yeah, what a great concern, and what a gift too, as you go through that plan to ease the transition points as much as you can, because it's already a challenging scenario when you lose a loved one, and then to add further complexity or challenge to the situation just to move assets around or gain access to assets. It can really be a hard time for those surviving spouses. And so, yeah, so great things there. I would encourage people to go take a look at the list of those considerations. Just always good to think about things from one vantage point or the other, and make sure that you're making a plan that really does provide that peace of mind for your family. And I did notice one other question we kind of talked about on the last episode, a little bit about some life insurance policies. And you put up a resource I thought that was really helpful on the blog. So, when a personal representative gets appointed or someone has passed, trying to figure out what the estate assets are and what are the probate assets and what are the non-probate assets or the trust-based assets. So tell me a little bit about this article post or blog post that you had out on finding a life insurance policy.
Yeah, so we'll just kind of go step by step. Step number one is to search personal files and documents. That seems obvious, right? Go through the individual's files and see what he or she might have had, and then if you get bank statements in the mail, then that kind of leads you to a financial institution. That financial institution may know about some life insurance proceeds. So you kind of are following the trail to see if there's a life insurance policy there. Step number two would be seek professional help. So maybe they worked with an estate planning attorney, and maybe that estate planning attorney has an idea of where assets are and if there is a life insurance policy. And that can be a helpful resource, not only an estate planning attorney, but there might be some other professionals that are familiar with the individual's assets. So maybe a financial advisor or, maybe a CPA, whoever did their taxes might have an idea. And then there's also some state resources. There is what's called the NAIC's Life Insurance Policy Locator. That is a service that's provided by the National Association of Insurance Commissioners. And it's a way that you can search nationwide for a life insurance policy. But you'll need some basic information about the deceased. You'll need to know the deceased full name and social security number, date of birth, date of death, and then your relationship to the deceased. And then that can maybe lead you to find out if there are any life insurance policies. And then there are some private services that are out there that for a fee can search for you. And, they may be successful, they may not, but they'll do the search for you. So those are some ways to look up life insurance policies. None of them is a guarantee, obviously, because there may or may not be life insurance policies available. But those are some steps to go through when you have the possibility of a life insurance policy in place.
That's good stuff. And I think, kind of to reiterate a couple of things that you were talking about there, is sometimes, like when you're searching those personal files, you may come across a policy letter or declaration sheet that said there was a policy and you're not sure if it still exists. It's a good way to sort of just check and see if it's there, because maybe it was the initiating policy and it was only a 30-year policy and it's now potentially expired. But you do want to kind of do that due diligence and figure out if there's anything there. And if you do find a policy, then that's where the phone trees start. You got to start calling the entities and working through the process to notify that entity of the passing and provide probably a death certificate and some information about who the decedent was, to determine if there were beneficiaries designated on the life insurance policy and what the claim form process is going to look like for that. And so you're just taking it step by step and trying to figure out if that policy does exist, then how do you get in contact to determine what's going on with it and submit a claim to make that through. So that's hopefully a helpful resource for folks who are looking at that or have life insurance as a part of their estate or trust responsibilities.
Life insurance can be a treasure hunt for sure. I'll tell you, the oldest one that I've seen so far in my career is from the 1940s, when parents bought a policy when the child was 1 year old, and the policy was still in effect just a year or two ago when I was working on it. So, I mean, there's no telling what kinds of things you'll find when you're dealing with life insurance.
Pretty amazing. Well, Thomas, I appreciate all the time and insight today. If folks have questions, where can they find you?
Best way is to go to vicklaw.org, vicklaw.org, and book a call. That's the best way to reach me.
Awesome. And I'm located up here in the heart of Hamilton County in Noblesville, Indiana. You can find our web address, noblesvilleattorney.com. Well, Thomas, thanks so much for the time today. We will see you next time.